You all. I'm Masood Raja, and I just thought today we should probably talk about writing and publishing, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. Please join us and let me know that you're here so that I can welcome you. And as always, I'm really grateful that you all have joined me. And, before we go into today's conversation, please do keep in mind that I have plenty of materials available on the website. There is a whole playlist that is called academic writing tips. And you can always follow the playlist and look into whatever is useful to you. So I'm going to wait here briefly and see if people join us. And then if there are no questions, I will, of course, sign off. But just letting you know that I'm here and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So I'm looking at the comments right now. I don't see any, but if you are posting any comments, they should be showing up. Okay, Sam, welcome. I just saw your message. I think yours is the first one. Let me know if you have any questions or anything that you would like me to address. But in the meanwhile, I'll start about my experience about writing and publishing. And my view always has been that you first have to ask yourself, why are you writing and why would you like to publish that? And I think that's an important question to ask because it kind of sets your philosophical priorities, but also your priorities in terms of which steps you will follow. So let me look at the questions. Okay, Nero Wolf, glad to see you're doing good, Mr. Raja. Thank you so much. Then we have Nitin Gupta, welcome back. And it says, I posted a comment, is it visible? This is the only comment from you that is visible. Then we have Madatar, been following you for a few years now and use your Freire series in my teaching. Thanks a million. Appreciate your candor on what is happening in Gaza too. So thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you're using the Paulo Freire videos because to me, it has been a journey of love. I've always liked Paulo Freire's work. But when I started recording this series, I realized that in the process of recording it, I developed a better understanding of Freire, not just from a teaching point of view, but also from the point of view of how do we live our lives in the world. So I'm so glad you're using it. Okay, and Madatar, the early versus late Fanon video is ace too. Thank you. I felt like doing that because most of the people, when they read Black Skin, White Masks, especially the ending, where Fanon is a bit more reconciliatory, and they haven't read The Wretched of the Earth, they haven't read the revolutionary Fanon. So I felt like people make kind of hasty conclusions about what he's about. So that's why I made sure to do that video. So Nitin Gupta, sir, my question is locating race in artificial intelligence, a variable research topic, a viable research topic. Well, okay, so I don't know how you could locate race in AI research, but here is how you can factor in the inherent inequality properties of algorithms, and I have a video on it too. And those are based in region and location. So just to give you a simple example, if you use YouTube or any other place, if you monetize it, the rates that are paid to the users are still dependent upon where the people are viewing from, right? So if people are viewing it from India or Pakistan, the creators get paid less, even though India is a market of 1 billion people, right? But similar views from United States, Canada, and the West make you more money. So I don't know if it's racial, at least it's based in regional identity that the algorithm recognizes. Even within that, certain regions of the world are privileged in terms of how much revenue can someone generate. And no one has really questioned it, but I did post a video on it talking about what I call the techno-orientalism of the AI. But good question. I don't know how it would be in a broader research context, but I'm pretty sure it would be a viable topic. Okay. M, welcome. How would you go about researching and writing a book chapter or any variety of academic paper, professor? Okay, so that's a really broad question, because if you are researching a book chapter, you will obviously look at what their call is, what is it that they are asking for, because book chapters are not traditionally just published, right? If someone is putting together an edited volume, they will send a call out for book chapters. You will read the call for papers and see, if it is something that you have expertise in, if it is something that you can address. Then you will write a proposal and you will send it to the editors. Here, I've read your description of your project. I think this chapter will be very suitable for it. And so that means that your beginning process would be geared towards figuring out what exactly are the editors trying to do. Do you have some knowledge or expertise in that area? And then pitching a book chapter to them. And then, of course, meeting the length requirements, the theory requirements. But that's roughly how you will write a book chapter. Now, if you're working on your own book and you want to know how to write a chapter, obviously your book has a theme, philosophical, theoretical, and when you start writing that chapter, you have to ask yourself, how does it fit in your general theme? What does it add to what you have previously discussed? And how does it lead to what's coming next? So, no chapter, very rarely would a chapter be a standalone chapter. It must, within a book, add something to the previous chapter or build on it, and then move on to the next chapter. That is for a monograph. In edited volumes, chapters are standalone chapters, but they are connected to the general thematics of the book itself. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Madatar, thoughts on the corporate capture of academic journals. Even the reputable commercial journals who are offering open access are engaged in rent seeking. There is quite a lot written about it. There used to be a list which was called Beale's list of predatory journals. But this is a fact of life, at least in the West, that most academic publishing is captured by 5 or 6 corporations: Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Springer Group. And these people, they publish our articles. The authors don't get paid much. Most of the editors are voluntary editors who do it for prestige. But the journals mostly are subscription journals. And then if you want to buy one article, sometimes it's more than $100. So it is a business model which suits these big mega knowledge corporations. And even if they offer open access versions, remember the authors have to pay a subvention to make their articles open access. And even that is not perpetual open access. I looked into it once. There was a journal, I had an article in it, which I wanted to be open access. The cost to get it open access for 4 or 5 years was more than $3,000. So, I mean, these are businesses that have slowly arrogated to themselves most of the knowledge that is being produced in the world. That is why the scholars, I mean, the pushback has been to publish open access. So if you want to find good, reputable open access journals, the directory of open access journals is a place where you go to find out what good journals are. But within open access too, there are certain groups that are in it to make money. For example, they would charge a review fee, they would charge a publication fee. So I always advised my students to never pay to publish. In humanities, there is no precedence, there is no system where you pay to publish. That model was only followed in the sciences because the scientific journals knew that most scientific research is funded by grants, and most researchers would add in the grant application the subvention fees. So in humanities, if anyone asks you to pay, do not publish there. But look for open access journals. There are quite a lot. I mean, if you are a post-colonialist, post-colonial text is a wonderful peer-reviewed journal. They will never ask you for money, and they have a really professional attitude. And there are quite a few others, thousands upon thousands. But be careful, do your research, and then send your materials there. Madhatar again, I feel the publishing status quo, which prioritizes corporate journals, also harms researchers from the global south disproportionately. Their institutions rarely have the funds for the OA license. Yes, I agree with you, and I think I partially answered that question that most humanities journals, even when owned by these corporations, will never charge you a subvention fee. And if they ask you to pay, move on and go to some other journal. And there are thousands upon thousands of journals, especially in humanities, who do not require you to pay and who have an impact factor, have peer-reviewed processes, are listed in the MLA journals list. And these are some of the ways you can find out if they are appropriate journals, if they are legitimate journals. Alhamluati, would you please explain the relationship between Lacan and Fanon? I could hazard an opinion on that, but probably not in a live forum because it would require me to reread Lacan and then see what the connection is. I know that Fanon relies on Freud, but to be honest, I couldn't really convincingly give a statement even on how Lacan and Fanon are connected. Nitin Gupta, okay, I'll give you an example. If I ask a very fundamental question on any AI tool regarding some of the most influential philosophers, it would always begin with a white European man and end with it. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, what is an AI? What is Chat GPT or GPT it's called? I mean, Chomsky really succinctly put it this way, that AI can rely on the knowledge that is available to answer our questions. It cannot produce new knowledges. And so if you take that as an axiom, which of the world's knowledge is more highly stacked up available in repositories, which languages, which philosophers, that's the Western knowledge, right? So then what does the AI do? I mean, how does it seek knowledge? It trains itself, right? But it goes out looking for information. And as you all know, internet is lazy. Internet will go to the closest source possible and give you a viable option. It's not going to go seek behind the scenes and go and find you remote sources. So part of it is a built-in bias where knowledge, even for these artificial intelligences, is Western knowledge and knowledge proffered in those languages. And so that doesn't even need much research. It kind of is the obvious. Now, the question is, what do we do about it? So obviously, bringing it up, talking about it, and then forcing the global giants of technology to acknowledge that there is a world outside of the West too, and to reduce that bias. I think that would be important. And that is a bias even in the non-digital environment. You know, people, when they talk about philosophical concepts and ideas, very rarely would they look at how others might have thought about it, how Chinese might have thought about it, how the Indian philosophers might have thought about it, how the Muslim philosophers might have thought about it. So that bias already exists even in academia, right? Very rarely, you know, will you, in political science classes, you know, they will teach you Machiavelli, but no one teaches Chanakya Kautilya, right? No one ever teaches, you know, Confucius unless you take a Chinese cultural course. And no one ever teaches Ibn Khaldun unless you take a course on, you know, medieval Islamic philosophy. So these biases are already there. Europeans and Americans, they always center their own bodies of knowledges as axiomatic and as central. And that's why post-colonial studies and decolonization studies are crucial and important, so that we can keep forcing the center to expand, right? So that's roughly my answer to that. Najma Rehan, thank you so much for joining. Shehzadi Nargis, welcome. Do you, okay, all right. Okay, Madatar, thank you so much for the super like. Um, I'm grateful, and I hope I've answered all your questions. Let me go to Shahzadi Nargis. Do you recommend doing research on contemporary literature or the classic? Your personal preference. I'm a post-colonialist, right? So my personal preference has always been contemporary literature. But here is a caveat. You cannot just say, I'll write about contemporary literature and not be aware of the classics. Knowing the classical literatures of all languages, English, you know, Hindi, Urdu, is important because it gives you that deeper and broader worldview. And then you can focus on contemporary novels or contemporary poetry. But yes, absolutely, contemporary works of fiction, poetry, drama are absolutely as valid as anything else. So, Madatar, thank you so much. You are the first person ever to contribute a super chat, and I'm grateful. And thank you so much. Okay, all right, let me go to other comments. Okay, I've answered that. And Nitin Gupta, thank you for the important intervention, sir. Well, thank you so much. You know, my approach as a scholar when I was at a university and even now has always been to ask myself, right, with my work, published and public, you know, to constantly ask myself, who does it stand with, right, in solidarity with? Because as scholars, it's so easy to fall for the seductions of power, right? And that's why I've always liked that Antonio Gramsci's division of the foundational and organic intellectuals. At the end of the day, imperfect as it might be, if our work is aligned in solidarity with the people in the world who are oppressed, people in the world whose voices are not being heard, then at least we are attempting to stand with them as scholars, public scholars, you know, scholars working at universities. It is when we sell our thoughts and ideas to powerful interests, right, is that causes problems in the world. And so my attempt has always been to remain committed to the public, right? No matter where I have been. And that's what I would highly encourage you to do, because such interventions are absolutely necessary, especially now. Madatar, any regrets on your decision to leave academia? It's so difficult to do community work. No, I don't have any regrets. I mean, there were things going on which I've never talked about publicly, where I would have either had to make a compromise and stay quiet and, lose my integrity, or, you know, leave on my own terms, right? Uncertain as it is or was, and see, can I still make a difference in the world? So I don't have any material regrets in terms of having lost prestige and having lost access to resources. I do miss my students, but I still have students, and my graduate students in the world, wherever they are, people who studied with me, are doing great work. I mean, they are my legacy. Only day before yesterday, one of my former doctoral students, who is now an assistant professor, sent me a Facebook message after he saw my video on Gaza. And I was so delighted and gratified to read his message, because what he said was that, Professor Raja, it doesn't matter where you are, what you taught us, we have built on it, we are passing it on to the next generation. And it made me feel great, because once you lose, when you leave academia, you're not just leaving a job, you lose part of your identity, right? And so as humans, we constantly feel then unimportant, right? And insignificant. And messages like these, or comments that you post on Facebook, they make us realize that no, people like us still matter in the world, right? And that it's okay to do what I am doing and what many of you are doing. So Madhatar, thank you so much. I am delighted and grateful for your support. And okay, Noor, according to you, what is the most profound problem in post-colonial literatures? That would be too hubristic to even say that there is one problem, right? I don't look at it in that way. What I look at it is not problems in post-colonial literature, but what is it that people are trying to do in things that we call post-colonial literature, right? Issues of justice, issues of historical injustice, rights of women, rights of minorities, the legacy of colonial experience. And as long as those issues keep appearing, and what is the state of the world in contemporary states, these are some of the profound issues of our time, issues of global justice and equality, issues of building solidarities across countries, yeah, across political spaces. I think these are some of the most important issues and profound issues that we all need to talk about in post-colonial studies. And most authors from all over the world, from the formerly colonized worlds, deal with these issues. Okay. Okay, I have a UGC net aspirants. Obviously, I think you are a channel, so good luck with it. And thank you so much for joining me here. And let me see. I'm trying to reach more comments. So I think Nargis ji, I answered your question, and there was a message which was retracted. Strange man says, "Sir, can you speak in Urdu?" Yes, I can speak in Urdu, like this audience is mixed, so I would rather stick to a colonial language with most of us understand. But I do have an Urdu channel, which would be useful to you if you just do a search on YouTube with Masood Raja Urdu, it should come up. And that's specifically for Urdu speaking students and scholars, and I'm slowly building materials up on that. Okay, let me see if I can reach. Okay, UGC net. How do you believe post-colonial theory can be effectively applied to contemporary global power dynamics, particularly in regions where colonial legacies continue to shape socio-political landscapes? Really good question. And people have already done it. One thing that I always caution people against is that they should not assume that post-colonial theory is one single theory, right? So there are post-colonial Marxists, post-colonial social theorists, post-colonial feminists, right? Post-colonial ideologists, post-colonial material critics. And even if you just look at India, the works produced by people like Ranajit Guha, right, Deepesh Chakrabarti, Partha Chatterjee, all of these people and the entire oeuvre of the Subaltern Studies Collective, all of these people are dealing with legacies of colonialism in one way or the other. Not just what the Europeans did and how they divided our cultures and plundered them, but also what is it that we are struggling with even now, right? So in any sense, post-colonial studies will stay relevant and will keep becoming stronger and stronger because more and more people are thinking about these things. So, I mean, if you look at the colonial legacies, both India, Pakistan, and to some extent Bangladesh, these are the regions that I know of. If you look at our civil and penal code, so much of it is still what we inherited from the British. Our civil services system is an exact replica of what used to be the British civil services system, right? Then the police, the way it is organized. So post-colonial studies then encourages us to question these power structures, right? And to ask our politicians and so-called leaders to redefine these things, to restructure these things, to make them more responsive to the people, right? One big problem in colonialism was that the state mechanisms were not built with people's participation. They were top-down. And if those are kept intact, that means then those institutions are not responsive to the people. So one struggle in post-colonial studies then would be study the legal system, study the law, study how civil services are structured, how the justice system is structured, and then articulate our critique of it, articulate our critique of it as being part of the colonial legacy. So I think that's the kind of work we can do in post-colonial studies. All right, let's go to Shehzadi Nargis. Your analysis of Gaza conflict makes Israel a loser, and rightly so. Israel has lost sympathy world over I appreciate your stance. Well, thank you so much. I don't think in winner and loser terms. The thing that was most important to me and still is that in United States, and it's a fact, Chomsky would tell you that, Judith Butler can tell you that, Senator Bernie Sanders can tell you that. If you criticize State of Israel and their policies and actions, you will be attacked. You will be labeled. So when you take a stance like that, like let's say my little stance, you are aware of that, of the consequences. But on the other hand, you have to weigh your own weight, your own moral weight. Do I see atrocities being committed, people being starved, the most dense population on this planet being bombed and obliterated? Do I stay quiet for fear of reprisals, semiotic and other? Or do I at least put my 2 words out there? For me, it wasn't a hard decision. It was just making a transition from a reconciliatory stance. I have never published scholarship of the extremes. I don't believe in extremes. But to finally commit to justice and equality and peace. And I am grateful to all of you and all the other people who are responding to my videos on Gaza and the genocide, because to do this kind of work, you need that support from the people reassuring you that they see what you're trying to do, that they are in solidarity with you. So you thanking me here is actually something that gives me more courage, right? Because even though I've been hiding the comments, thankfully the people attacking me do not outnumber the people who have added their voice to my voice. So, let's keep it so. Let's hope for an honorable, just, and dignified solution for the people of Palestine. So UGC Net aspirant, I'm Yogesh from Bombay and qualified UGC Net. Okay, thank you for joining us. And we have Hamsa Qasim. By the way, Hamsa ji, thank you for joining us. What was the exact moment that made you revise your stance on Gaza-Israel conflict? There is one. A good question. Well, it didn't revise my views. I have always been an unapologetic proponent for the rights of Palestinian self-determination. What it made me revise was the way I view the state of Israel. Now, previously, when I critiqued the state of Israel or spoke about it, I would stop and pause to, be a bit diplomatic about it. What Gaza has done for me after seeing the death and starvation of children and people is that what it asked me to do or encouraged me to do was to stand up and say, from hence till the end of my days, I will speak in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And I will mount a constant critique of atrocities committed by the state of Israel and the humiliations that they constantly keep throwing at people of Gaza and West Bank. And there is a whole history of that. I think that was the shift, to commit to it. to put energies into it and to think about it. Because previously it wasn't centered in, my mission. So I think that was the change. Okay, UGC net aspirants. Given the complexity of post-colonial identities and experiences, how do you navigate the tensions between essentialism and fluidity in understanding? It's not hard for me to navigate that. I never essentialize. I never talk about a people or a condition in essentialist terms. I absolutely believe that what we do in the world and what people do in the world or larger constituencies do in the world are because of material imperatives. I have about 900 videos on my channel. I have published about 1,000,000 words or more. There, you will not be able to find a single sentence in my published work where I essentialize a group of people. I always place my understanding of the world within material terms, and within that, the constitutive parts of our identities, which are material, sometimes ideological, but which do not stem from a deep source within. I think other than love, which is natural to us, everything else is taught to us, right? And if it is taught to us, then it is socially constructed. Love is the only thing that we express, right, towards others, which I consider essential. Thank you so much. And if you don't mind, please tell us your real name as well, because right now what I'm seeing is UGC net, and that's okay. But thank you so much for being a part of my life. I have Crimson Tanky. How is this my first time hearing this awesome human analysis? Well, thank you so much. There is always, a first time, but thank you so much for joining me here. UGC net, could you discuss the role of language and discourse in perpetuating or challenging colonial hierarchies? How can linguistic analysis contribute to the decolonizing efforts in academic research and beyond? Well, thank you so much for asking that question. It's a really complex question. Now, if you go to my channel, I think there are 2 videos on linguistic imperialism. And this comes from a lot of sources. If you look at the role of language in colonial history, and it is still perpetuated in former colonies, India, Pakistan, English is still a privileged language. I think one of the most acute analyses of what language does in colonial scenarios is Ngugi Thiong'o's chapter in Decolonizing the Mind, where he talks about 3 functions of language, right? And so one function of the language is that it is language of exchange, right? We know who does what in language. It is a mode of communication is another attribute of language, because we understand each other if we have a combined or collective language. The third function of the language that he talks about is that it is a carrier of culture, that it carries generational knowledge from one generation to another, and it is passed on through language. In colonialism, especially in oral cultures, that function of language is destroyed, right? And replaced by the colonial language. Now, when you study colonial language, and I'm still using Ngugi Thiong'o, how was it taught? It was taught in schools. But as children were learning the language of their colonizers, they aren't just learning a foreign language. They're learning a new form of aesthetic, right? What do they study? The daffodils. I mean, none of us in India had ever seen a daffodil, but all of us grew up praising the daffodil, right? So it reworks our aesthetics, where the European aesthetics become the norm, but it also creates a disdain for our own culture. If we have internalized that English is the language of elegance and Shakespeare, we also internalize that our own languages are inferior. This was further emphasized, let's say, in Nigeria, as Ngugi points out, that in public schools established by the British, you were forbidden to what was called the dialects, the native languages. And what the teachers would do to find out if kids were speaking in native languages, they will give a token to one of the kids and say, pass it on to someone who speaks Gikuyu or any other native language. And by the end of the day, the teacher would ask who has the token. And a kid would raise their hand, and then he would follow the chain. Who gave it to you? So there'll be 12 kids who will be lined up. And the teacher would know they were the ones who had spoken their native language. And then they will be publicly humiliated. So what happens then is, then in acquisition of the colonial language, you're already internalizing the aesthetics of the colonizer. You're also internalizing that your own languages are inferior, and speaking in them is something that can get you humiliation. And then you're also learning another thing, that this is the language of power. If I want to succeed in the world, I must know English. That's the part that we still have in India, Pakistan, and elsewhere. I mean, I don't know about India, but in Pakistan, there are people who will teach you the British accent. We're not just happy with speaking English eloquently. We want to speak it like the British. That is the colonial legacy of the English. I mean, how out of place it is in Pakistan to have a person speaking in a purely British accent, other than, let's say, those who grew up in England and came back to Pakistan. Of course, that's their natural accent. I mean, it is artificial, but it is privileged and considered cool, right? So how to undo it? I mean, Ngugi's answer was that there are no literatures in the native languages in Nigeria. So the local authors must produce in native languages, and he does that. In 1970s, he stops writing in English. He publishes his novel, which is later he himself translates as The Devil on the Cross. But Ngugi was dealing in a culture which used to be oral, and when oral tradition was destroyed, it was replaced by the European written tradition. In India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we do not have that problem. We have rich histories of Tamil, right? Hindi, Bengali, Urdu literature, Sindhi, Pashto. So what I encourage my students or people that I talk to from Pakistan is that have both. Learn English, right? But do not internalize this idea that English is superior to your native languages. You're getting a PhD in English. Know something of your own literature too, of your own great people. I mean, I have conversations with a lot of Pakistani young scholars, and they ask me, which theorist should I use? I want to do the material this and that of Pakistan. And yeah, I can refer to them to a lot of Western theorists, but I like, go read Sobo Gyan Chandani, right? Read Hamza Alvi's work, Iqbal Ahmed's work, So training ourselves that, yeah, I'll go to my Foucault and I'll go to my Western philosophers, but can I incorporate in this discussion maybe something from my native language and native culture, being conscious of that. So you're not repudiating English, you're repudiating its colonizing impact. And you're not becoming a nativist by saying, I'll just write in Sindhi or in Tamil. you're still a scholar who will matter in the world, but you're mobilizing everything, right? And the power of your own native culture. That's kind of a very long response to your question, but thank you so much. Uh, all right, let's see. Nero Wolf, yes, will this live be saved? Yes, absolutely. It will show up under the playlist, which is the live streams. Mir Kinza, where are you from? I'm originally from Pakistan. Carolyn Lane, Salam and Ramadan Mubarak. I came to your channel to learn about post-colonialism, philosophy, and theory. Your position on Gaza is very much in line with post-colonialism, Orientalist, Freire, etc. Yes, of course. I mean, anyone worth their name who does post-colonial studies and who has read Paulo Freire, I think will have the similar position. And Carolyn, thank you so much. Okay, Yogesh Tiwari, you are with the UGC Net aspirants. You probably have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of subscribers on your channel, but I will look it up and I will subscribe too. Carolyn Lane, I'm working on my dissertation and you have taught me so much and given me so much to think about. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to know that, my work in one way or the other has been useful to you. Okay, Carolyn, if you have a chance, please discuss critical theory, critical race theory, and take a look at Noor Ali's. Okay, Muskrat, I'm aware of that. I'm using CRT and Muskrat as theoretical frameworks. I haven't had a chance to fully read Ali's book, but I'm aware of it. And when I have some time, I will probably record, some videos on these issues. Mohammad Ramzan, thanks a lot for learning on post-colonial theorists and academic writing. Very grateful for your adept guidance. You are most welcome. Bilawal Hussain, sir, my question is, in spite of a lot of literature on the genocide in Gaza, why we are not in a position to create that picture which must draw the attention of Western world. I think the attention of the Western world is pretty much drawn, but there are powerful interests at stake here. I mean, if you want to know about the people, I have seen protests here in the United States, thousands upon thousands of people in the streets, and not all of them are Palestinian, not all of them are Muslim, the young progressive people. And never forget that some of the strongest proponents for Palestinian rights are the Jewish people themselves, okay? So Jewish Voice for Peace, I do recommend you go and look up their website. These are the people who are standing side by side with Muslims and other progressives. So yeah, the Western governments might be reluctant to acknowledge our voices, but the people are listening. And that was my point in the video, that things have shifted. The young progressives in the United States, whatever their religion, are by and large mostly for justice for Palestinians. And that is a fact, right? And they have also become a very strong political constituency. So I have great hope. Please don't, I have a lot of questions and I'm going to ask one by one. So yes, I mean, you can ask these questions, but as you know, at a certain point, I always have to end the live stream, right? So we are approaching about 50 minutes so far, and I think I've addressed all the questions. Okay, Liz 10, I will totally slaughter your name, so I'm not going to say. What do you think of Eric von Daniken's work? To be very honest, I am not much familiar with it, but I will definitely look it up. Wasn't he the one who was banned on TikTok? I could be wrong, but okay. Andres, Andres Sudavar, what is your area of research specifically focus on, and what is your stance on non-Western political theories? Is there something which Western-oriented theories of politics can learn from in Asia? So, like, by training, I'm a post-colonialist, and if you just look me up, you will find what I have published. Mostly, whatever I have published has always been informed by Western theory, but as well as theories and philosophical thought from Pakistan, from the Islamic world. So I've constantly mixed and matched my theoretical and philosophical understanding of the world. Okay, Carolyn Lane, do you think that mutual interest convergence is coming into play with Gaza? I'm not sure that I understand what mutual interest convergence means, but I would rather say that what we have seen happening in Gaza has mobilized people who otherwise were never really interested about what was going on. They had just the boilerplate idea of what was going on. But in my exchanges and interactions with people, this is something, and I will thank the social media for it, where people who have never really gone and stood on a street for Palestinians are doing that. And that is crucial. So I don't know if it is mutual convergence of interest or rather people saying this cannot be right, this cannot be moral, and then finding ways to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. I would also like to say that people like Noam Chomsky, Senator Bernie Sanders, and Judith Butler, all Jewish scholars, and okay, Sanders is a scholar too to me, they have opened a space for us. Okay, 2-3 years ago, you could not openly criticize APAC, right? On social media and elsewhere without getting in trouble. But when Bernie Sanders comes up and gives us the figures of who they are funding and how much and against progressive candidates, and when Judith Butler basically says, okay, let's talk about it. You want to talk about it? Let's first discuss what is an armed struggle. And Chomsky, of course, has been a prominent critic of Israeli policies since the 1970s onwards. So these people have created a space where saying something in favor of the Palestinian people, it is still attacked, but it's not so perilous for people, right? And I think that gives me courage. So a combination of suffering of the Palestinian people being made so visible, seeing the destructive aspect of Israeli armed forces and their disregard for human life becoming so obvious, the presence of social media where young people everywhere in the world or in Gaza are reporting what actually is going on, and then powerful intellectuals and politicians opening this space for dialogue is what, in my opinion, made this possible. Excuse me. Okay. All right. So I think this is a good point. And yes, absolutely, Norman Finkelstein, one of the earlier figures and one of the most prominent figures speaking against the Israeli policies consistently. So thank you so much. I think we are beyond the 50-minute mark. So I'll come back and probably in a week or so, but I'll try to make this a regular feature. I'm deeply grateful for your support. And I'm also deeply grateful, Madatar, to you for your contribution to my channel. And I will now be back whenever it's possible for me to do a live stream. Until then, thank you so much and peace and love.